In this video, I'd like to talk about what values are. There's probably a lot of different ways to explain this, but I want to pick out one because I think it's particularly useful for this course. And the basic idea that I'd like to present here is that values are a kind of structure that helps us decide how to allocate our precious finite resources. And that's going to hopefully make the connection between values and rationality a bit clearer. Okay, so consider the following value claim. This apple is good. You might say it's a good apple. Now, saying that it's red, say if I say this apple is red, hopefully we can all agree on whether that's true or false. But this apple is good, we might have substantial disagreement about that. And that kind of disagreement makes values feel, let's say, subjective. It makes them feel, in some sense, unreal. But I want to make the case here for a way of thinking about values that, although it's context sensitive and it depends on you as a person, it's nonetheless a very real fact about the world and deeply tied into the way we think. So there's a good old philosophy rule that comes from David Hume, which makes a lot of people think that values have very little to do with how the world is. And this is, we'll call it Hume's law. Hume says you can't derive an ought from an is. So ought, you ought to do this or you ought to do that. Hume says, look, you just can't get one from the other. So from a description of the way that the world is, you can't derive a description of what you should be doing. The facts are just the facts, and how you feel about them is a separate issue. So that seems to me importantly correct in some ways. So if you have, for example, the fact that your hands are dirty, suppose your hands are all filthied up from something, you can't straightforwardly derive just from that fact that you should wash your hands or you ought to wash your hands. So you can't get from the description, your hands are dirty, the normative claim that you should wash them, at least not by itself. What you need in addition to that is something like the values claim that it's good to have clean hands. And if you can imagine somebody rejecting that, so suppose somebody says, no, I love having dirty hands. This is great. This is the way I prefer my hands to be. Then they would reject the inference from your hands are dirty to you should wash your hands. So it's really just in combination with a values claim that a claim about facts can entail another values claim. So, or for example, astronomy can teach us new facts about the universe. That by itself really doesn't get you the claim we should do astronomy research, right? You have to care about learning new facts. So knowledge is good, plus astronomy can teach us new facts, gets you we should fund astronomy research. By itself, just the fact that astronomy can teach you new stuff doesn't entail that you should fund it, because again, imagine somebody rejecting this claim. Somebody says, you know what, we know enough stuff about the universe. I don't need any new knowledge, so I'm not going to fund your astronomy research, even though I acknowledge that, yeah, it would teach us new things. So this is kind of Hume's law in action. Just the bare description of the world, just the facts out there in the world, don't give you normative claims unless you have a normative claim kind of linked up with it. So this makes a lot of people skeptical that you can get sort of values out of observations of the world. Now, what I'd like to present to you is a 4-level model of how I think values work to structure our beliefs and behaviors that ties it into some incredibly practical stuff and hopefully shows how values can play a role in our rational sort of behavior in the world. So I propose to accept Hume's law. I do think that in general, you don't get values claims just from facts about the world, but nonetheless, you can't behave as a rational being without having some values to structure your behavior. Okay, so I'm going to go through these 4 levels one by one, building up from stuff that I really think everybody should agree exists and is real and is important, and then going up towards the level where maybe we could have some serious disagreements. So this class is about science and values, of course. So I think that I'm going to try to make the case that everybody should agree that we have behavior and that we have goals and that we have values, and that you can't really be a finite rational agent, a rational agent with limited resources and abilities without having values of some sort. And what we might disagree on is whether there are any good ethical theories. So I'll describe that kind of like transition where I think it becomes rational to we could have a rational debate about this stuff between values and ethics. Okay, so that's where we're going to go. Let's start from behavior. Okay, so in behavior, let's consider all of the things that you can do. And let's include in that both mental and physical acts. So if I wave my hand, that's a kind of behavior. But if I sit here and just quietly think of the answer to 2 + 2, that's also a kind of behavior. So this broad sense of behavior where it can include both mental and physical acts. So think about the space of things that you can do, the space of possible behaviors that are available to you right now. I would argue that this space is vast beyond comprehension, just unbelievably vast. So you could, wiggle your left forefinger and then click your tongue and then, kick out your right leg. When you start combining all the possible behaviors you have available, the number of combinations quickly becomes inconceivably vast. So the number of possible sentences that you can write dwarfs the number of atoms in the visible universe by orders of magnitude. The number of possible dances you could do, or the number of just behaviors you could string together is unimaginably vast. And if you start thinking about that space, the space of possible behaviors or combinations of behaviors, it's pretty clear that most of them get you nowhere in life. So, when I wiggle my finger and then kick my foot and then click my tongue, that doesn't get me anything. And if you just sort of picked randomly from the space of possible behaviors, your likelihood of coming up with a combination that leads to you having any kind of life at all is hilariously low, right? So you can't just randomly move around the space of possible behaviors and expect to have a life that's worth living. You have to really narrow in. You have to really focus in on some subset of behaviors. And you do that primarily by having goals. So your goals organize your behavior. Suppose I have a goal to eat lunch, and then I have a sub goal, which is to, in order to accomplish my eat lunch goal, I'm going to make myself a cucumber sandwich. Okay, so the chances of me successfully making a cucumber sandwich by just doing random behaviors, I can turn my head to the right, say the word potato, clench my teeth. Like if I just randomly do stuff, what do you think the odds are that I'm going to end up with a cucumber sandwich? I think that they're pretty low. Not just pretty low, they're hilariously low. So your goals help you decide from that unbelievably vast space of possible behaviors, which are the relevant ones, which are the ones that you should sort of, pick out of that space. You pick a path through the space of possible behaviors by having goals. And everybody has goals. The fact that you're able to watch this video lesson or like get dressed in the morning or take a shower or like any of the basic life functions that you do, all that is predicated on you having goals. So I know you have behaviors because you wouldn't be alive if you couldn't behave in some ways. And I know you have goals. If the fact that you made it into university shows me that you have some goals. You might not love the goals that you have, but you've got them, right? So goals in some sense organize and structure our behavior. They help you pick out from that unbelievably large space of possibilities which behaviors are relevant. Okay, so, and being an intelligent agent means being able to intelligently choose your own goals. So suppose I go into the kitchen, I try to make myself a cucumber sandwich, and I find that I have no cucumber. I say, oh darn, I guess I'll just starve. Well, no, of course not. You've got this larger goal that structures your sub-goals. You can say, I'll make a different type of sandwich. So your larger goals help you pick out smaller goals, and so on and so on. Okay, so then what goals should you set for yourself? So we're able to flexibly and intelligently set our own goals. It's one of the things that picks us out as intelligent agents. So what goals should you set? And here's where we get to the levels of value. So your goals tell you how to behave. How do you know which goals to set? And I would argue that values are how you set goals. So which goals should you set for yourself? Values are like abstract kind of meta goals, right? So maybe you have the value of making a lot of money in your life, or being very kind, or being very popular. These are large scale values that you might think are important. Taking care of your family, that sort of thing. So those aren't very specific, and typically a value is not the kind of thing that once you've done it, you sort of stop valuing it. So once I've made myself a cucumber sandwich, that's no longer my goal. But once I've been nice to my family, I still want to keep being nice to my family. So values are kind of like large abstract meta goals that are more stable and more permanent than the smaller goals that they help to organize. But your values do help to organize your goals in just the same way that your goals help to organize your behavior. So what goals should you set for yourself? This is actually a very serious question because it's just not clear. Given the complexity of modern life, there are many, many different goals that you could set for yourself. And just like the space of behaviors, the space of goals is likewise vast, practically beyond comprehension. So you really need some guidance on which goals to pick. I mean, you could pick silly goals. You could pick goals like maximize the number of paper clips that you own. You could pick goals like, I want to tear as many pages out of books as I can. You could pick any kind of goal that you want. So which ones do you pick? And again, just like behaviors, if you're randomly sampling the space of possible goals, you're probably not going to have a very good life. Like, you're not going to have the kind of life that people would regard as rational, in some broad sense of rational. So your values help to structure your goals. And in that sense, they're like abstract meta goals. Your goals structure your behavior. And without those two levels above your behavior is not going to be anything like what you would call rational behavior. So you have to do this, right? You have to do this as a finite rational agent. You have to pick and choose what you're going to do. So you can't have a maximally relaxed life and a maximally successful career, right? Your values are about choosing how you're going to spend your finite resources. If you had infinite resources, if you had infinite time and infinite energy, you wouldn't have to choose, right? You wouldn't have to choose your goals. You could say, I'm going to do all the goals. I'm going to just tick off the list. I could roam around in the space of possible goals forever. We're not like that. We are finite agents. We try to be finite rational agents, and our rationality depends on making sure our goals are the correct goals for our values. So in this sense, our values are our guidance through the space of possible goals. And your values can compete. Of course, I do want to have a relaxed life. I also want to be successful in my career, and I try to balance those against each other. So it's not like you can't have incompatible values. You can have values that sort of pull against each other, but you do have to decide how your values shake out into some set of concrete goals. And this is all just to be a basically effective agent in the world. So assuming that to be rational requires that you be able to be effective in the world, right now we've got a 3-level model where you really need values. And values are essentially tied up with your ability to reason and behave. Okay. So that's the behavior structured by goals and goals structured by values. You might ask a similar question about your values. So what should your values be? It's a kind of unique fact about modern humans that we get to set our own values to some degree. I don't know if other animals can do this. It's unclear to me, genuinely unclear. But humans can, to some degree, shape our own values, which is a pretty profound thing to be able to do. You can decide that you don't want to care as much about your career as maybe your parents did, or you can decide that you want to care more. You can decide that you value honesty over loyalty, right? Those might be competing values, and you can shift. So your culture, your family, your upbringing, and your biology all come together to give you a set of values, and it is occasionally, or maybe even often, up to you to decide whether those are the values that are important to you, those values that you want, or whether you want to shift your values. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work to change your values, but it is possible. So you might furthermore ask, what values should I have? What should I value in life? And if you want an answer to that question, you might need an ethical theory. Okay. So ethical theories are supposed to justify values claims. So an ethical theory, I haven't given you a bunch of examples here just because it's sort of getting out of the realm of this course. If you're interested in this level of ethical theories, there's lots of excellent courses at U of T. The philosophy department has tons of this stuff. So, I mean, there's tons and tons written on the subject of ethics. Not everyone agrees that value claims can be justified, however. So there are people who are ethical nihilists who think, you know what, your values are just your values. No set of values is any better than any other set of values because all the ethical theories fail to be rational or true, something like that. So that's a kind of skepticism at the level of ethics. That is, that there's not a meaningful sense in which we can talk about one set of values being better than another. On the other hand, there's lots of people, and I'm among them, that think there are some true ethical facts. That is, some values are better than others. So maximizing greediness is probably not as good as maximizing kindness. To get into why takes us a bit outside where we're interested in, but we can have a meaningful debate about the degree to which ethical theories can be rationally formulated, the degree to which ethics are objective facts or subjective facts. All I've tried to do here so far is pick out this sort of like three levels at which it really, I find it hard to imagine how somebody could make sense of the world without subscribing to the idea that there are behaviors. And you can't really make sense of the behavior of human beings without understanding that we have goals. And our goals would be completely unstructured and unstreamlined if we didn't have values. So I hope I've convinced you that these three levels at least make sense. And those are the levels that we'll be dealing with at our course. Questions about resource allocation, questions about priorities, questions about how you're going to spend your very precious time and energy. Okay, so with that in mind, the quiz for this week, which is not actually a quiz, but we're going to sort of roll it into the marks that go towards your quizzes, is this. It's the Schwartz Value Survey. Okay, so to do this week's quiz, which isn't really a quiz, you're going to go down to week 2 and then click on quiz 1. And then you'll click on this bar, which will take you to a new window. So here we go. It might ask you to log into your Microsoft account, by which it just means your U of T email. So just enter your U of T email and credentials if it asks for them. Okay, so once you're here, this is a short Schwartz Value Survey. It's meant to assess what people think is important. And the idea is just that you rank these things by, you can pick one up. So click and drag. If I pick one of these up and click and drag, I rearrange the order of them. And I really like this arranging them in an order sort of type of survey because it really captures what I've been talking about throughout this video about values, which is they're about choosing how you're going to spend your precious resources. So, for example, perhaps I really care about having a great time. So hedonism, just having a lovely, lovely time. But I also care about benevolence, that is being nice to people, being kind and generous and all that stuff. Well, the fact is that you're going to have to, in some situations, choose one or the other, having a good time versus being nice. And the same with all 10 of these values. These are sort of things that you can't all pursue 100%. You have to decide where you're going to put your precious finite resources. So do think about this. I mean, this is not a quiz. There's no right or wrong answers. Once you're done, you'll just click submit and a mark won't appear right away. But once everybody's submitted, what I'll do is sort of give you all participation, 100% participation for this quiz. But do take a minute with this, because despite the way that education is sold, this might be the only time that somebody asks you to explicitly think about what you think is important in life. So like, do you care more about power or world peace? So it's personal power for yourself. Or do you care more about, national security, family security, social order than you do about having a good time? That kind of thing. So give this a shot. Once you're done, hit submit, and it will send me your name and email. Other people won't be able to see what you submitted, but I'll be able to see that you submitted. And that's all you have to do. This is the easiest marks you get all semester. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thanks, everyone.